And so moving on to the next topic, I want to look at the top 10 prospects in the 2021 draft, in my opinion. And so this is sort of, I guess, a sneak peek at my big board, my top 32 players, which will be updated up until the 2021 draft. But right now I only have 10 players on it. I'm gonna be updating it both on my website, which you could find on any of the social medias, linked in my Anchor FM page or my site. That also has my social medias if you can get to there first. But yeah, I'll also mention them at the end of the video. So my number one prospect is Trevor Lawrence, obviously quarterback out of Clemson, considered a generational type quarterback. I think he's consistently performed well throughout his career. A lot of people like to say he's overrated or Justin Fields is better and all that stuff, but I don't buy that. I think he's prototypical size, but he has great athleticism as opposed to a lot of guys that have the size but not the mobility and stuff like that. He fits well in today's game. He's gonna have the chance to perform on the big stage again, which will obviously give scouts an opportunity to look at him even more against great competition, even though the ACC is terrible. But he'll be in the college football playoff again, of course, assuming there's a college a season this year. But yeah, if there is, he'll be there. My number two prospect is Penei Sewell, the tackle from Oregon. He's 6'6", 331. Well, great athleticism. He was the best lineman in America. Just a dominant player. I think he was the best lineman on that Oregon O-line, which was the best O-line in the country. And so I think he's just a generational tackle prospect, sort of like Lawrence at quarterback. Third is Justin Fields out of Ohio State, quarterback. I think he has a really nice blend of athleticism, athletic ability, and ability to throw. It's sort of Russell Wilson-esque, but obviously I don't want to make that comparison because Russell Wilson is one of the best players in the league. And also, height-wise, Justin Fields is 6'3", so he's bigger than Russell Wilson. He can throw on the run very well. The only question I have with him is I'd like to see him do it again next year, because he's only had 1 year of tape. His freshman year, he was actually at Georgia, but he couldn't beat out Jake Fromm, which I have questions about because I'm not very high on Jake Fromm. And so why couldn't you beat him out? Even though I know Jake Fromm was beloved in Georgia, so that's probably the reason. But he transferred to Ohio State and he performed very, very well. That's why he's third right now. But I just like to see him do it one more year, and he'll really solidify his spot and maybe even have a chance at the number one spot by this time next year. Or maybe he would have, by this time next year, the draft to be over. So maybe he would have been the number one pick. I guess we'll see. Four, actually, have Gregory Rousseau, edge rusher out of Miami. He had 15.5 sacks last year. I think he's very good. He's a great athlete. For his size, he's about 6'6", 6'7", 251. And sort of like with Justin Fields, I just want to see him produce again next year. And he's a top 5 pick top 5 prospect, at least in my opinion. At 5, Jamar Chase. I really like Jamar Chase. I mean, I watched almost every LSU game last year, and every game he was dominating. Obviously, he had a lot of help with other receivers like Justin Jefferson, Terrace Marshall, guys like that around him. Thad Moss at tight end, and obviously Burrow at quarterback. And so I'd like to see what he can do without Burrow and Jefferson and all those guys. Obviously, Terrace Marshall is still there, but we'll see what happens. Obviously, in the national championship game, the last thing everyone remembers of him so far, the last game he's played, he dominated A.J. Terrell and had a lot of people questioning if A.J. Terrell was a first-round prospect, first-round guy, which he was. He just had a bad game against Jamar Chase. But, yeah, that's how good the guy is. I think he's going to be a really good receiver. So that's 5. At 6, I have Micah Parsons out of Penn State. He's an amazing linebacker, one of the best linebacker prospects probably since in a while. Other guys that are similar, Luke Kuechly, guys like that. Except he was actually recruited as a defensive end out of high school, so he has great pass rushing ability. Along with he has sideline to sideline speed. He can drop back in coverage. He can play the run and obviously run the passer, as I mentioned. And so he's a do-it-all guy, outside linebacker out of Penn State. I think he's just going to be a really good, solid prospect player as well. And in the pros, at 7, I have Patrick Surtain, the second corner out of Alabama. He's a big corner, relatively big, 6'2", 203. He's very versatile, so he could play outside, he could play inside on your slot receiver. He's great in man. He doesn't really give up much separation. He's just a really solid corner, a great corner who I think is going to be a top 10 draft pick next year. And so that's 7. 8, I have another Alabama guy on the other side of the ball, Jalen Waddle, a receiver. I have him ranked higher than Devontae Smith, actually. I think he's a speedy guy, sort of closer to Henry Ruggs. And he also has route running ability. So, like Henry Ruggs, he's not a John Ross guy where he can actually play receiver. And he's also very valuable in special teams, punt returns, kick returns, things of that nature. He can help you a lot. Obviously, he scored a few times on punt returns. And so I think he's going to be a good receiver prospect, second best right now in my opinion. At 9, I have another tackle, Walker Little out of Stanford. He can play guard, I think. He has guard traits, but he's listed as a tackle. He plays tackle. I think he's probably going to play tackle. His athleticism is serviceable. It's good. He could use it in the pros. He can win his one-on-one matchups against the linemen, and he's a great tackle. I think sometimes he gets too aggressive, and that ends up with him, being run over by the D lineman, him falling on the floor, giving up some plays. But overall, I think he's a great lineman. And then at 10, I have another corner, Shaun Wade out of Ohio State. Obviously, he was ejected for targeting against Clemson. Probably shouldn't have been targeting. Even if it was targeting, that rule should change. You shouldn't be ejected for one targeting call. I don't think that's fair. That really changed that game. But I think in terms of the player himself, he has great instincts. Even though I'm just talking about the targeting stuff, I think he's disciplined when it comes to lining up against your receiver, his hand placements, all that stuff. So he's a great corner. He tackles well for a corner. He can tackle very well, so he'll get the guy on the ground. No tackling issues with him, I think. In press coverage, I've seen him get beat, but overall, I don't think there's many flaws. Obviously, with all the top 10 guys, there won't be too many flaws. But I think if I'd had to say anything for him, just works somewhere on press coverage. But overall, a really good corner out of Ohio State. My second best in the class. And so that concludes episode 2 of the Pro Sports Talk podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you'll join me next time on the Pro Sports Talk podcast.